Welcome back to the Lanterne Rouge Cycling Podcast. LR and Benji here. This show is always presented by Zwift, the online cycling platform that makes training fun. Now time for our first ever mega recap of the Tour de France Femmes avec Zwift, which, as you know, was supported by our show partners Zwift, who are supporting the Tour de France Femmes for another 3 years. So if you're watching this show, you're helping grow the sport and supporting this race. So thanks for listening. Thanks for anyone that watched the race live. If you'd like to support Zwift as well and give easy, fun indoor riding a go, head to Zwift.com for your free 7-day trial. But we'll do the rapid fire stage recaps. Stage 1, the Champs-Élysées stage. Wiebes wins as expected. The sprint takes the first yellow jersey. Vos, there was that Longoborghini Balsamo counter. She goes with it with Persico. Vos dusts everyone in a little uphill finish. Ludwig won that sprint, uphill sort of sprint to Epernay on stage 3. Vos still in the leader's jersey. Then Marlon Reusser on the white gravel stage. SD Works go for the stage win. She wins the stage. Vos still in yellow. Then Lorena Wiebes wins the Sondier de Vosges sprint, which had a few little hills, but she got over them. Vos still in yellow, but green looking good for Vos because Vos is sort of second and third always on these stages. And then Vos wins the Roschheim stage, her second stage win, still in the yellow jersey. That sprint where I think Wiebes she crashed, was dropped. And then the huge mountain stages. Van Vleuten goes on Petit Ballon, puts huge time into everybody, wins the stage by 3 minutes ahead of Vollering, wraps up GC, takes the yellow jersey, and she wins with that yellow jersey on the Super Planche de Belfi yesterday, which was a kind of a perfect Tour de France. To be honest, Benji, this played out actually exactly how I expected. Like, there wasn't really much divergence. Van Vleuten winning both mountain stages, winning GC. Vos winning 2 stages, being the best versatile sprinter. Wiebes being the best sprinter. But my question is, could SD Works, who decided yesterday to pace after the Van Vleuten multi-mechanicals, could they have actually done something differently in this race?
I think they could. I think there's been certain stages in this Grand Tour, in this Tour de France Femmes, where we did not have Annemiek van Vleuten at her best. We saw gastro issues during, I think it was stage 3-4, that region roughly.
Yeah.
We noticed that she wasn't at her best, that she was dropping on smaller hills and so forth, that she hadn't eaten perfectly in the lead up to those stages as a consequence of those gastro issues, and that led to some dropping, some coming back, stuff like that, and situations where SD Works didn't take advantage of those moments. They had moments in the race. I don't know the specifics of the situation in that stage anymore, but the group in which SD Works were, they did not work to keep Annemiek van Vleuten behind. And I think when it comes to gastro issues, you can take advantage of that, in my personal opinion. Like, it's part of racing. If a competitor,
if you're going to pace after a mechanical, then
yeah, exactly,
it's the same. So I don't understand.
Is it because people criticize them for not taking advantage of the gastro that they took advantage of the mechanical?
No. I think I don't really understand. To be honest, I think it's very difficult. It's difficult with 6-rider teams too, because you don't have those 2 extra riders. SD Works basically a team of stars. Kopecky, like Moolman wants her own result. Royce is like a champion in her own right. Like, it's a team of stars. Whereas like Trek, a little bit more cordon Rigaud is a domestique.
Yeah.
Ellen Van Dijk is happy in road stages to be a domestique, and she's overqualified for that. Majoris is the exception to that for SD Works, but they don't have 3 Majoris, they have 1.
Exactly, and there's that aspect to it, because that's an important aspect not only in the race, but in the lead up to the race, that it seemed throughout this Tour de France Femme that SD Works had not decided who their all-out leader was going to be, and that they were more on a stage-to-stage basis and see what happens in the end kind of deal. And we noticed that with the Reusser thing, where once again they had the opportunity to put pressure on Van Vleuten, but they decided to go for the stage win instead. And whether that was a decision or a mistake with communication and so forth, we've heard different stories from different people. I'd argue it was probably a mistake for choosing the stage win over the other, over GC at that moment in the race. And if we look at that, then Reuser is the rider that is being selected from that situation to take advantage and take the stage win. We saw multiple stages in which Vollering was doing work for Kopecky, was at the front on a gravel section very early on. Like, I think Vollering also just spent more energy than she needed to in the lead up to the mountain stages. Whether it had any effect eventually, I don't know. But all these things combined meant that I think Vollering could have been closer to Van Vleuten on the final GC standings than she was currently. And
But could they have taken 3:48?
No.
That's the thing. So if you don't have... If you know you're going to lose 3 mins and you don't think you can take 3 mins and you're only going to take a minute, but you sacrifice the stage win on stage 4, you go home with still second, but now no stage win.
Agreed. That's indeed. Is that a mistake? I don't know if that's a mistake then. Like, we can talk about it all we want.
I don't think stage 4 is the problem. I think stages 2 and 3 are the problem.
Okay.
When Van Vleuten was dropped on that punchy climb and she was coming back solo and Vollering soft-paced and then Moolman went for the stage. That's the one where I'm like, both of you need to get on the front and absolutely drill it rather than half going for GC, half protecting Vollering's GC, half going for Moolman's stage win. That was the one where I'm like, let's try to take 90 seconds here. Because they still took 20 without even doing it. But by the time we got to the white gravel roads, I don't know. To be honest, when a rider can take 4 minutes on you in 2 stages in the mountains, there is little you can do. But yeah, I do think Benji with a 6-rider team, if I'm SD Works next year, I will try and have clearer priorities and roles. And I think they maybe had one too many. I think the Kopecky plus Vollering plus Moolman GC plus Royce, I think that was one of them has to give.
Yeah. And I think they also had some bad luck this Tour de France Femmes. They had Reusser having her concussion, being out before the mountain stages started. Kopecky was not in the form she was in the initial part of the year. Like, there's some aspects there that definitely impacted the strength of their team. And if they were stronger as a team, they might have been able to pay that team factor more in those first few stages, which they ended up not really doing. So, I don't know, it's a combination of weaker tactical decision making and a worse team than I anticipated before the race started.
Yeah, I thought Kopecky, she was not in her spring shape. Like, normally she's not in a Vibers group immediately on any climb in her spring shape. She won Strade Bianca. She won Tour of Flanders, right? Like, I don't think she was in her spring shape. And yeah, speaking of sprinters, Lorena Wiebes, the best sprinter in the world. Like, no one can touch her in a pure bunch flat sprint. I think Champs-Élysées, it is what it is. Like, that was always going to be a sprint. But then stage 5 is the one where I was really surprised that more teams didn't try and put her under pressure. Like, they must know. They know at this point, if you go to the finish, like, you have 9% chance of losing unless she crashes. Like, were you surprised not to see sort of rouleur attacks on that 1.5K, 4% climb and other teams seemingly happy to contribute to controlling the race?
It was somewhat surprising to me. Yes, the breakaway that was initially in that stage was riders that were perhaps the teams that we expected to put pressure on. We was in the first place. I think Henderson was in the break for Jumbo, where Vos was in the peloton. So there are situations in that race where it kind of blocks the ability of going in that race. I think Cordon was also in the breakaway, but I'm not 100% certain anymore on that stage. So those are kind of the teams we'd expect to put pressure on that stage on Wiebes. But it's clear that she's the fastest sprinter on flat sprints, and the key to beating her is simply dropping her before the sprint is there. And sometimes the parkour is good enough to allow you to do that. Sometimes the parkour is not, but if you don't try, you're never going to make it happen. And that's how he was won that second stage, as simple as that. And I think that second stage was perhaps avoidable when it comes to the competition in terms of having her win, but the first one was simply unavoidable. If she's in a good position, then she's going to likely win. But your lead out can actually be a factor, because on that Champs-Élysées stage, I'd argue that if Henderson closes the door legally, just like we saw in last year's men's Tour de France with Teunissen to Cavendish, then I think Vos might have more of an opportunity to win that Champs-Élysées stage, although Wibbers might still find a way to come around once Vos launches.
It would have been a lot closer, a lot closer if Henderson had gone diagonally across to the barrier, but she left it open. It does sort of opened up for Cool. I guess Wiebes lost Charlotte Cool as well during the race. Did that make a difference? Like, she was still able to win without her. I think she wasn't there on stage 5. But yeah, it's clear that you just can't go to the finish with her, and you must use any sort of, like, it's tough because if they got Pfeiffer, Georgie, and Lippert, they can control. Like, they got a strong team to control as well. That's the problem. DSM have put a really strong team around her.
And it's now pretty funny because now we're talking about both SD Works, and we spoke about both Wibbes, and that's becoming a factor next year if we have to hear all the transfer rumors with Wibbes going to SD Works. Like, it's going to become even more troublesome for SD Works.
What is
in terms of, I don't know, like when it comes to it's a great transfer. Like, for SD Works, having the best sprinter in the peloton is a great transfer. It might make their leadership stuff a bit more troublesome. She might not have a proper lead out in races, although Kopecky might actually become that role in the Tour de France Femmes next year if this occurs. But who knows? What I see as a beauty from that transfer is that we might finally see Charlotte Cole get the opportunity she deserves at a World Tour level at DSM, which I'm looking forward to.
True. Charlotte Cole, probably top 5, top 6 sprinter in the world. Could be better than that. And I guess I would say there's no question that, like, Kopecky's pure sprint is not even Vos level this year, I don't think. So she's been more of a classics rider, so I think she should be the lead out for Wiebes. But that would be, if that transfer goes through, then the rich get richer. SD Works. I don't know, that Tour de France team. That Tour de France team is going to be very, very busy next year with 6 riders. But otherwise, how would you rate this Tour de France Femmes, Benji? Like, I think they backloaded the parcours. I think yesterday's mountain stage was actually quite good. I enjoyed that a lot. How would you rate it? The White Road gravel stage, I think, was pretty good, although maybe teams weren't aggressive enough.
Mate,
yeah, how would you
called
rate
it the bridge stage of the men's Tour de France. You compared that to the gravel stage.
It wasn't as bad as the bridge stage.
It wasn't as bad at all.
But that was SD Works and Trek's fault. I thought it was going to be carnage. It was there. Whereas the bridge was a block headwind. Like, there's nothing anyone could do. Yeah, I would rate it a pretty resounding success, and even commercially, which it seems to be you. Did you see the France TV? You speak French, Benji. The France TV numbers look pretty good. The views on the podcast have been really good. Views on the highlight videos on the Lanterne Rouge YouTube channel have been good.
I think when it comes to our numbers, we can compare to previous races, and we see that Tour de France Femmes is doing great compared to other women's races we've covered. But when it comes to the France TV numbers, I don't know what we're comparing to. So I just see numbers, and I'm like, ooh, numbers, they sound pretty high.
Millions.
Millions. But I've got no clue what, like, the baseline is, what we're comparing to. So I'm just guessing that it was good numbers. I know that they did the Vive Velo show, which is like the national Tour de France TV show, also for the Tour de France Femmes, and I think it did pretty well towards the Tour de France Femmes as well. So hopefully we see those numbers increase over the coming years. We see more interest in this race, because I'd argue it was a very successful race. We saw pretty much loads of people by the side of the road in the races as well, which is curious to see. I think the Tour de France brand adds a lot to a race, and I think whether that's men riding their bike or women riding their bike, it's just as entertaining if you spend the time enjoying and learning about it, because the biggest factor of getting into women's cycling in my eyes is still the learning curve of getting to know the riders, because it's the same as every other sport. I have difficulties getting into F1 because I need to get to know every single person
you just watch
in a bloody
Netflix
car.
show. You don't need to get into it. Just watch Drive to Survive and you know everything, and then watch the highlight videos on YouTube like I do.
Yeah.
I'm an F1 fan.
Okay. A lot of people are going to get roast you for that, but I'll leave them to you. But like, there's that aspect to it, the learning curve. I think once you can figure that out, then it's awesome. So I hope the Tour de France Femmes can be that kind of gateway into the sport of women's cycling for mainstream men's cycling fans to try and jump over a bit. There's been a few discussions on social media about, oh my God, women's cycling, so many crashes and so forth. I think it's a bit of I think that's a non-discussion, because I think in general, we've seen way too many men's cycling crashes as well. I think there's definitely been more riders on the ground in the first 3 stages of the Tour de France last year than in most of it is Tour de France Femmes. I think that's an entire discussion that is
Yeah,
useless.
that's just haters.
Yeah,
I just
fuck it.
Yeah, ignore it. Like, everyone that watches races know crashes happen wherever. I do wonder about the positioning of it on the calendar.
Yeah.
And I do wonder whether if you start it straight after Tour de Suisse, this race is probably bigger than Tour de Suisse easily. If you start it before the men's tour,
yeah, but
is the media less fatigued? Are viewers less fatigued? I'm not saying it wasn't a success. I'm just trying to say how to maximize and optimize interest. If you have that week before the men's tour, you have all the eyeballs, like when Paris-Roubaix Femmes avec Zwift now on the Saturdays before the men's Paris-Roubaix, it gets a lot of interest. The counter argument is it could get drowned out by previews, by discussions about the men's tour.
True, but there's also the factor of the national championships at the end of June, right? Isn't that after the Tour de Suisse?
Yeah.
They're pretty important.
Nah.
They are.
Yeah, true.
Is it is it an issue to have DNCs of the women's races earlier during Tour de Suisse, the men's Tour de Suisse? It's probably organizational, more difficult. I've got no clue how to fix the issue, but like also the Giro Don is also fucked in the calendar, right?
True. Well, that has to move. Well, will they move that? I mean, it was during the first 2 weeks of the men's Tour de France. Like, that's just a battle you're never going to win for eyeballs. It's just impossible. No race does. Like, no races. It's the clearest calendar. I think there have been words of that moving. And Annemiek van Vleuten. Anyway, that's just a discussion. We don't really have access to all the audience numbers. Impossible to really definitively say. Just putting it out there. Annemiek van Vleuten, though, she did the double, won the Giro Donna, won the Tour de France Femmes avec Zwift. Is it a foregone conclusion that she just cleans it up next year, Benji? I don't think it is. I think it's possible that riders can come through, improve really fast. Like Cavalli's trajectory, Vollering's trajectory. Like, it's possible if Cavalli keeps Persico. Yeah, if she gets a decent contract, I'm not saying she's not on one already, but if she's on big contract, she can go to altitude and do everything like that. Who's to say that she couldn't be up there next year?
I agree with that. She's had great support when it comes to Volcar in just a lot of races that she's ridden. She's shown over the last 2 years that she's godlike talented, third at Cyclocross World Champs, leading into this Tour de France Femmes as well, where she had the Giro Don 2 weeks ago, where she got 7th, also a great race for her. And now we come to this Tour de France Femmes, where she's so consistent throughout this race. And honestly, I like her as a rider. I like seeing her ride because it's one of those, like, the riders that came out in the last 2 years and has popped her head out and is like, okay, now I'm here. Now I'm going to show you what I've got. Kind of like what we expect from a Blanca Vaj at some point on World Tour level, where she hasn't built that through yet, but she's also significantly younger, so she's allowed to wait a few more years to make that godlike step in World Tour, for example. But I think those kind of riders prove that there can be quick switches when it comes to World Tour, and I think it will depend on the transfers of teams and so forth, whether Annemiek van Vleuten is the all-out favorite for next year's Tour de France Femmes again, whether her form next year will be similar to this year. At some point, Annemiek van Vleuten will eventually run out, whether that's going to be next year or within like 5 years, for example. I don't know.
Tom Brady.
She announced her retirement, right?
I think maybe.
No, I don't remember anymore. Paris? But like riders at Movistar, they stay on their bike for 17 years after announcing it anyway. So
I think Van Vleuten said that she has an advantage because she's older than some of the other competitors, and so she has the ability to do high training volume. I agree to a certain extent. I would say if you take a Blanca Vaj or these Cavalli level talents, Persico level talents, and you very quickly transition them into a Van Vleuten programming with altitude at least twice a year, with all the bells and whistles of training camps, nutrition, everything, you'd be surprised how quickly riders their level can just ascend. They don't need, rather than the 10 years of fitness and endurance. Now, of course, they can't double their training kilometers in a year. Usually, most riders can't do that. But I think if you add that into a lot more riders, and it is happening, I see it here all the time. Many women World Tour riders training here, doing like mountain prep. I think you'd be surprised how quickly riders will improve fast.
Yeah, and I think there's a significant difference with how the men's and women's peloton still preps these races. Like, if I had to guess, I'd say 5 to 10% of the women's peloton goes to altitude, while probably 100% does it for the men's Tour de France, for example. So that's a big difference, but it's a money question as well. But is there a danger for a rider's training? And it is like, I'm not even sure you know this answer, but is there a danger in ruining their potential by forcing it a bit too much too swiftly? Like, we're talking about sending someone to altitude twice a year, upping their training volume. Fine. Can it fuck them up?
Well, yeah, training volume. If you double training volume, not in a smart way, then yeah, that could be a big problem. Doing altitude, as long as you adjust everything and account for it, I don't really see why that. Maybe some riders don't react well to it, but that's not going to be a bigger problem. But yeah, if you say, okay, Van Vleuten is doing 30,000 Ks a year. If you want to beat Van Vleuten, you need to do 30,000. I know you've only been doing 17,000 Ks to date, and you're 22, but you're going to do 30,000 next year. That sounds like a recipe for disaster. But yeah, we'll see. Like, I think Cavalli and Persico and those sort of riders really want to watch in Blanca Vache, and so I don't think it's a foregone conclusion that Van Vleuten's just going to run away with it next year. Like, a lot can happen in a year in cycling. Like, Jonas Vingegaard winning the Tour, wouldn't have expected that in this fashion a year ago. A lot can happen. But yeah, Van Vleuten looks good. What about Marianne Vos, Benji? Probably, so it's hard to compare. Like, Van Vleuten was the best overall GC rider. Vos was probably the best overall stage rider, like top 5 or 10 in like 6 of them. Green jersey winner, 2 stages, success. What do you expect from her? Can she, I guess for Jumbo Visma, just rinse and repeat? Like, just hope she can do it again next year.
Rinse and repeat, and try and figure out youngsters that can grow besides her and learn from her along the way, and hopefully replace as a collective the results that Vos does alone in the coming years. Because, I don't know, it's from that movie Moneyball. If you can't replace a rider individually, you got to replace them in a collective. What's that scene? I don't even know anymore. Like, there's a scene in that movie, right, where they have to replace a certain player and they have to do it with multiple players instead.
We can't replace Giambi. We can't afford him, but we need his on base percentage. So we're going to get three guys to get he gets on base. That's the scene. Yeah, replacing Giambi's on base percentage with three players, one of whom was Giambi's brother, I believe. Those sort of principles do work in cycling a little bit. Marcus looks fucking good. Rihanna Marcus, she's really, really good this Tour de France Femmes. She's like 27, really coming. She was a top domestique, won women's Dutch national champs. She's got a contract through 24. I'm not sure Moneyball applies in cycling. Like, I agree with the principle. I do. But I think with Pogačar, Vos, with like the top talents, it's you can't, like, I'm not sure it works in cycling. Like, if you have Pogačar and you have the money, you will come at worst second in the Tour.
Agreed with that. I think I agree. Okay, sorry, I agree.
Well, no. What you mean is if Vos goes, you get Marcus, and then you get another 3 riders like her. Suddenly on stage 5 with the 1500 meter 4% kicker, you try a different strategy with these strong rouleurs, and you try and win the stage in a different way with multiple riders. It is possible. It is. And I think in the aggregate, you can try stuff like that. But yeah, it's rinse and repeat. I think she also brings up the other riders as well. Like, it must be very rewarding riding on the front, and then Vos just cleans it. Same with Wiebes. But yeah, she had a great Tour de France Femmes avec Zwift. She doesn't look, I mean, her pure sprint this year looks better than last year, Vos. Yep. I know she won Gent-Wevelgem last year, but this year it looks even better across races. But yeah, any last thoughts on the Tour de France Femmes avec Zwift, Benji? Any Persico we've already spoken about ad nauseum. Is there any other riders you think just keep an eye on them for next year that surprised you?
not necessarily surprising, but Shirin van Anrooy is one of the names like winning the white jersey as expected, but still very talented. Yara Kastelein also doing really well. Marie Linette did better than I expected at FDJ. I'll be honest about that. Julia Bergström at AG Insurance was second in the white jersey classification, 32nd in the Tour de France Femmes. I think she's really bloody talented, and I think she's going to be in World Tour in the coming years. And we've heard a lot about that AG Insurance team recently because I think Lefebvre is throwing money at it again or something, and Soudal might join that. Rumors in that sense, and Kopecky might break her contract at SD Works to join AG Insurance.
Well, no. Nothing's been said about that. What Lefebvre said, when he heard the Vibers rumor, he said, well, I mean, that could have problems for Kopecky. What's Kopecky going to do? I mean, if she wants to come, he said that. It's just shit stirring, which is pretty funny. But yeah, a lot of teams are moving up, investing. I want to throw a name out there, Veronica Ewers. She ended up coming ninth, 7th on Planche de Belfi, 4th on the gravel stage. She won Sarah Tizet stage. The final one came 2nd on GC there. This is her first year at World Tour level. She was on Tibco last year, and a lot of riders on Tibco, who was on Tibco last year? Giganti, Faulkner, and now Nina Kessler. But yeah, I just want to throw Ewers out there. Yeah, she's 27, but it's her first year in Women's World Tour. I know Tibco had a good schedule last year. She's still, her rate of improvement, I still think will be very, very fast. You can see that her season this year is a really, really, really good year. So watch out for her next year. She could definitely be someone who, don't be surprised if she's pushing for top 5 next year. Same with Labou. Labou's looking really good, and she should have won the white jersey if it was U25. But they're the names I want to throw out there. I think it was a great race. Can't wait to see, I think, what's Europe. There's the Scandinavian races coming up. I'm not sure how many of the Tour de France Femmes avec Zwift riders will be going there. Then there's European Champs, which normally the women's race has an absolutely stacked style list.
Ludwig has to do Scandinavia, I think.
By law.
Ludwig. What, sorry?
By law. Is it in Sweden or Denmark? I don't know.
I remember that there was Denmark, Sweden, and Norway as the 3 countries that would work together on this, but I'm pretty sure that one of the countries is not in the parkour.
Damn.
Norway has to be in because it comes from the Ladies Tour of Norway. And I'm guessing that Sweden is probably the extra country. I think Denmark might be the one. I might be completely wrong. I'm guessing it from the top of my head at this point.
She should do it. Yeah, it could have good start lists, but European Champs, one-day race, usually has Van Dijk won last year. Usually had a pretty good start list. But that's all from us. That was our mega Tour de France. Both races recap. Thanks for listening. Thanks to Zwift, as always, for supporting the show. Let us know what you think about all the topics we spoke about. Bit of a different style today. I think it was a lot better, but feedback is, as always, appreciated. And yeah, thanks for all your support for the month. It's been a grueling month from us. We're very, very tired. We'll be taking a week off. Polonia will have a recap, overall recap, not daily recaps. Benji's going, I don't know where he's going, actually. I'm going to San Sebastian next week.
And Brussels.
It's a fairy tale fucking city. How could you not like it? Swans on the lake. Benji won't get that reference. All right, that's it. Oh, you have watched the movie finally.
I actually saw it in the past, but I didn't get the reference last time you made it. Now I do.
Yeah, I mean, my accents, they're on point, I guess. Ray Fiennes, great performance. All right, this is just ended. We're off. Bye.